we have to I think accept realities that agriculture is of course very much dependent on the weather and on soils. And that's why what I wanted to do was to address the issue of the terrain, the terroir, where we plant, and also assessing risk transfer mechanisms for funding. Private sector cannot lead if they do not feel confident that there are systems in place where their investments can be safeguarded. I believe that farmers must be left to plant, and investors and entrepreneurs must be left to do the business and to invest. We have shown time and again that Filipino farmers know how to plant. So for me, the weather vein of whether the public has that confidence to invest in a sector is to try to see how the banks are behaving with regard to that sector. If you can see very heavy intervention by the banks in lending, then you know that there is a system to mitigate risks and to protect loans and investments. But in the case of the Philippines today, we even have a law, Republic Act 10,000, where 25% of the loanable portfolio of banks are supposed to be set aside for agriculture lending, and banks are only too happy to pay penalties every year rather than lend to the agriculture sector. Last year, the penalties reached about 1.5 billion pesos. Banks would rather pay 1.5 billion pesos in penalties rather than lend to the agri sector. So that tells you, Maria, that there's something wrong with the sector. It cannot protect the investments in that sector. And that's why if there are policy changes that need to be done, we have to look at those realities, the reality of the land and the reality of the weather, and how do we protect investments against that. That's why I said there must be a way to bring together agricultural land from its fractured state. That's why I said a system of consolidating land and securing tenural land arrangements with longer leases, if not ownership, longer leases, to allow investors to have that runway to invest. And with regard to weather, since climate change is here, how do we create a risk transfer mechanism, an insurance, a guarantee fund pool, so that investors can invest confidently? How can we set up a system wherein the movables of the movable properties of farmers and farm investors can be used to leverage as financing? How do we do that? What's the state of our warehouse receipts law? Non-existent. If you put all these things in place, you try to free up agricultural land and make it a productive asset. You have a guarantee fund pool. You have a crop insurance system. You have a warehouse receipt system. You have a secure transaction system where movables can be leveraged. Then you're giving a signal to the banks in this country, and you're giving a signal to all the investors that you can come into Philippine agriculture and you can invest. This is the one missing part in Philippine agriculture. We talk about investments, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about crop support, line by line, product by product, commodity by commodity, but nothing's going to happen. It's going to be a continuous system of non-stop dole-outs unless you address the entire financial system. We have to build an agricultural economic financing system for agriculture. If you can build that, you create that environment, then as I said in my talk, even the trading of commodities will not be far off. People are going to be running to agricultural co-ops and farmers and secure their produce and trade it, just like they did in Chicago 150 years ago when it started, the Chicago Board of Trade. That technology has been there for 150 years. So that's my take. It's a legislative broad stroke. What are we doing in Congress? So all the measures that I talked about have already their counterpart bills in Congress. And hopefully we can get that support from the Senate. Because if you can build that financing infrastructure, it is a signal to the private sector to come lead the way. Government cannot do it alone. So that's my takeaway on how to move it. We in government can only create the environment and allow the private sector to lead. We can give directions and guides. But where the private sector will take it, we must free them to take it where they want to take it. We in agriculture must not be too concerned about how much we are importing or how much we are exporting. I think we in agriculture must be concerned about how much jobs have we created. What is the take-home pay? What is the state of rural income of Philippine farmers? Do not be concerned about what we are planting, what we're selling. As long as we have enough money to take care of us when we are sick, we have enough money for our retirement, and we can send our children to school, and we can also enjoy a good and decent quality of life. The standards of agriculture must be that. It must not be how much rice we created, how much we produced corn, how much livestock, and how much fisheries. It should be the income and the employment of our people, which is our main concern, especially we're already at 103 million Filipinos today. Thank you very much.